All right, here we go. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening. It's Doug Mitchell here. I am just delighted to be with you. This is actually one of my very favorite nights of any month is the Glacier Book Club, and of any year to be able to once again have Christine Carbo with us tonight is a real treat. As you watch tonight, we don't have a presentation, so if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can move your view. If you like seeing everybody, you can see everybody. If you want to do speaker view, and that'll be in your top right-hand corner, then when Christine's talking or I'm talking or people are asking a question, that speaker would pop up and be bigger, so you can feel free to do that. But I think it's interesting. I feel like we are so spoiled here in the Flathead Valley for any number of reasons, right? It's such an incredible place to live, but it's also a place where incredible people live. And you know, when I think about Christine Carbo, in one way you think about, oh yeah, it's a local gal who grew up here in the Flathead, who, you know, taught Pilates, and she's part of our whitefish community. You know, but you know, that really minimizes this incredible person. And I really think it's a little bit like saying people in Mississippi who say, yeah, John Grisham is the guy who coaches my kids' Little League team. That may very well be true, but he does have a really successful other life, and so does Christine Carbo. And sometimes we forget that, and I neglect to kind of celebrate that. And I said earlier when we were visiting that I'm always so challenged and energized by Christine and her intellectual capacity, her thoughtfulness, her kindness. And I think that all comes through in her books, and we're going to talk tonight about Weight of Night and what I really think is, I mean, they're all great, but this is my personal favorite. But I'm remiss because I never list Christine's accomplishments, and she is a multiple award-winning writer, and she's the recipient of the Women's National Book Association's Pinkley Prize, the Silver Flashen Award, and the High Plains Book Award. I mean, and they don't give these out to anybody. And so, yes, she is our neighbor. Yes, she's our dear friend. But she is also a remarkable artist who has shared so generously of her gift with us at the Glacier Conservancy and here with the Glacier Book Club. So Christine, thank you for once again spending an evening with us.
You're welcome. I'm very honored to spend another evening with you guys. Yeah, it's a true honor to be with the Conservancy for the book club night. I have a lot of fun. And thank you so much, Doug, for all the wonderful compliments. I'm not sure I deserve all those compliments, but I love them. So thank you.
Well, you certainly do. And my brother and I were talking, as I said the other day, and he just wants to know when he gets his next one. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But when I want to start tonight by kind of thinking about and getting from you an idea of how did you get to this book, right? So we, as a book club, we've talked to you about the first two books, in which we learned that one of the things you did in those two books is you took a character from one book and you placed them in the forefront of the next. So as you completed book two and you were thinking about In the Weight of Night and what that book was going to look like, when and how did you come about the decision to, you know, bring Gretchen forward as the main character, to bring Monty through, leave Ted behind? Tell us a little bit about that process. How did that come to be?
So yeah, when I wrote the Wild Inside, which was my first book, I felt like I had played through Ted, the main character's entire character arc. And I felt like he was not necessarily a series character for me, just because I really felt like I'd played through that emotional arc of his, the main thing for him. And, you know, I'm not saying I couldn't continue on with Ted, but it just didn't feel quite right to me at the time. And I think as a new crime fiction writer, I also was a little intimidated by the idea of carrying one character forward book after book after book. I mean, it just seemed a little daunting, and I've I love series characters, so don't get me wrong when I say this, but it seemed like it could be a little boring for me as an author to just try and come up with new stuff for one character, book after book. So I decided that I would keep my world, because I was so enamored and so in love with the world that I created, based on the real world that I love, the Northwest, Glacier Park, the Flathead Valley, the whole area, but specifically Glacier National Park. And so I wanted that universe to stay. And so it made sense to create an ensemble series, where I would pluck a side character and bring them forward. So I could keep some of the other characters in the first book and give some familiarity to the reader, like there was some continuity, but not bring Ted forward. And so with my second book, Mortal Fall, it just made sense to pluck Monty, because he was probably the most prominent secondary character in The Wild Inside. But then to me, the tertiary character, Gretchen, she wasn't necessarily super prominent in my first book, but she became more prominent in Mortal Fall. And I began to really have a relationship with her as a character in Mortal Fall. And so it was a natural progression for me to bring her forward. But interestingly enough, even though I introduced her in The Wild Inside, developed her a little bit more in Mortal Fall, she still stayed a little bit of a blank slate to me in terms of who she really was, what her background was. And so when I wrote The Weight of Night, I had no idea that that's who she was. Like I hadn't thought of that when I introduced her, and I had no idea that she had that sleep disorder in Mortal Fall. I created that for her, and I developed that for her. And the reason I developed it for her is because it was something that had stuck with me for a while. And I've mentioned before, when I've spoken before to other book clubs or done other talks, that because people ask how you pick your ideas quite a bit, and how I know that I can spend time with an idea for an entire year. It usually takes a year, sometimes more, to write a book, a book that long. And when I say that long, 400 pages, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but somewhere around that, over 100,000 word range. It takes about a year. And so I know that I have to like the idea if I'm going to spend that much time of my life with an idea, with the characters. And the way characters come to me is, the way I know I have a good gem of an idea is that it sticks with me. So I might read something, or I might hear a story, or I might meet somebody that mentions something interesting to me. And when I walk away and it just keeps kind of replaying in my mind, or it comes back to me a month later, and then another month later, or, a year later, then I really know that I've got something that's just sticking with me, and that might be something I should really dig into. And so with this, I had read an article about a sleep disorder called parasomnia, and there were just some tragic stories that I read about in this article, true stories about people that have this condition, people that have actually found themselves in horrific situations where there was a man in London that I read about who had murdered his wife because he was dreaming that there was a demon in the bed with him, and he had strangled her. And when he woke up, he had killed her, and it just ruined his entire life. I mean, to know that he had done this to someone he loved. And then on top of that, he had to, go through a trial, and they had to figure out if he was guilty or not. And thankfully he wasn't found guilty. He had doctors and EEGs done and all sorts of tests and things that proved that he was indeed not responsible for his own actions, because it was something that just happened when he was sleeping, and he could not appropriately shut his body down when he went to sleep. And so I read that story, and there's one about a guy in Arizona, and there's one about a guy up in Canada, and the one from the guy, there's actually a little documentary on it, and the guy in Arizona, actually, I think it did go to jail because the jury just would not buy it, even though the doctors said, that that he really did do all this stuff in his sleep, but the jury just wouldn't buy it because he put, I mean, strangely and oddly enough, and this is how strange the sleep disorder is, that you will do really detailed things. Like he put his wife's a bag of clothes in the trunk of his car, and he just did really odd things. And the jury felt like that was just too odd and that he had to be guilty. So he's in jail. But, there's just really some heartbreaking stories around this. And I kept thinking about it for a long time, even while I was writing my first 2 books. And so by the time I got to The Weight of Night, I knew that was another idea that I needed to explore. And yeah, so that's kind of what I did. And I just kind of piled it on top of Gretchen.
Yeah, and I think this is really, I think, an important thing for us to hear. We sometimes when we think about fiction, we think, oh, the author probably just sits there and makes stuff up, right? But a lot of research goes into the work that you do, which is why it takes a year to write a book, right?
Yeah, and sometimes more. Like I said, sometimes it takes more than a year, but that one took about a year. And I did read a ton. I read a ton of stuff on sleep disorders. And then you have to be careful that you don't put too many details about things into your book, because then it gets a little, fiction is, you have to keep it going. People don't want to get dragged down with too many details in fiction.
Right. No, that's true. Well, we've already got some questions, and I'm just so honored to work with an incredible group of coworkers. I'm delighted to introduce Andrew Smith to you all tonight. Andrew is our new communications lead, takes over, as I mentioned earlier when we were getting started, from Jill Bridgman, who I'm very proud of. Jill kind of left to do some other pursuits, and will always be a part of our Glacier family, and certainly the Glacier Book Club family. Grace Kinsler, as always, makes everything happen here. Sean O'Leary is kind of helps make sure that we know who's where, and you all get the right emails at the right time and things like that. And Stacy Dubuque as well. And Amy has stepped in for Jill and is going to be kind of our question asker tonight. We're also going to do some giveaways. And to Carl's good question, I'm going to ask you guys to think about the book, and think about Monty and Tara and Nathan and Mr. Combs and the rest of the band of the renown, and who might play those characters in the movie. That's the question we're going to get to at some juncture here. We'll also have a speed round for Christine as well, that she doesn't know about yet, but that'll be fun. So Amy, start us off with a couple of the great questions that are in there.
Well, I might as well start off with Carl and Candy, our longtime friends and great book club participants. And this is a good one to start off with, I feel like, Christine. So let's get to the bottom of things. When will Monty and Gretchen get together? We thought for sure it would happen in this book, says Carl and Candy. So can you give us any insight to their relationship?
Okay. Well, part of the reason, I'm going to repeat myself, that I chose to write an ensemble series is so that I could write kind of for the most part, a book that stands alone and play through one character arc and then kind of move on to a new book that can still stand alone. And I know that I cheated a little bit between Mortal Fall and The Weight of Night, because I wasn't going to, but I felt like Monty wasn't completely done the way Ted was after The Wild Inside. So I did carry him forward, and I gave both points of views, which was sort of challenging, especially to do 2 first-person points of view in the same book, because you don't want it to smear all together and have it just sound like one character. So you have to try and make sure that you stay true to their voice, and it can be challenging because their voices are often just your voice. And so, but that's a different question. But if we want to talk about that later, but Monty ended up being brought forward. I brought him forward because I thought that I just really liked him. And like I said, he had a mystery that was a little bit unsolved at the end of Mortal Fall that I just didn't solve. And I thought it was okay to not solve it. There was a question of his childhood friend missing, and I thought it was okay just to have him have this haunting thing that happened in his younger years that influenced who he was, but never was solved. And then when I was writing The Weight of Night, it just kept bugging me. I felt like I needed to solve that too. So that's the part of the reason I continued on with Monty and his perspective. And I felt like he was also just going to be really close to the investigation with a child being abducted from a campground. So Monty continued, and then there was Gretchen, and there was that a little bit of a spark between them in Mortal Fall, but Monty was still married. And in The Weight of Night, Gretchen is just so guilt-ridden and so afraid of herself in a relationship because of what she'd done to her brother, that I didn't feel like I could just plow ahead and have them enter a full-fledged relationship because of that. It didn't ring true to who she was and what she was trying to do in terms of protecting herself and protecting the people that she cares about. And so I didn't feel like I could just jump into that with them, I mean, fully. Yet one of the things, and I know this is frustrating for readers, and I'm so sorry, I apologize, but one of the things that I enjoy the most when I read about characters who may enter a romantic situation, and this may sound weird, but I think that the thing that makes the writing most interesting is the longing and the anticipation. And it's kind of almost a little bit of a letdown when they actually get together in some books. And so I thought it would be more fun just to have the longing be there and not actually the getting together. Is that a cop-out?
No, I think it's awesome. Plus, we're giving away 2 copies of the next book. So
I do kind of want to hear what Carl and Candy think about that. Is that a cop-out, Carl and Candy, or are you going to keep reading?
I don't think it's a cop-out. Thank you. That's kind of the impression I felt. It was like a tease that there's still more to come. Stay tuned for Monty and Gretchen. Something's brewing, but I totally understand what you mean about where Gretchen's mindset and where she's at.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right time for them to get together, but I feel like you've got something brewing with these two.
Yeah.
So kind of like a teaser. That's just what I got out of it towards the end. It's like, oh, there's something brewing here, because you've got 2 really hurt souls, really, really kind of devastated backgrounds and hurt souls. And I just feel like you've got something cooking with those 2 in the next book or something. I don't know. Stay tuned.
Well, I hate to disappoint you too much, but I do move on to other characters in the next book. But yeah.
You're gonna be so stoked. Trust me, you're gonna be so stoked about these characters.
Oh, okay.
Now we really will want the movie to come out, because they always change the movie a little bit, right? So maybe you'll get your ending, Candy and Carl.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kathy W. Asked, before you started talking about the sleepwalking and REM behavior disorder, she asked a question, just how did you come up with it, which I think you maybe covered. And she just mentioned that it's a really fascinating concept. So
thank you.
Had somebody's attention. Yeah,
I thought so too. I thought it was.
And
it's super tragic. I mean, super traumatic and tragic. And poor Gretchen, that I saddled her with that. I mean, it's a pretty horrible thing to be saddled with.
Yeah, for sure. Gina asked if you ever get any flack from locals since you portrayed flawed people and worse, including murderers living in the Flathead Valley.
Not too much, not too bad. After The Wild Inside came out, my first book, I got a little bit of flack about writing about the canyon, the way that I did. And and maybe a little bit with Mortal Fall too, just the idea that the canyon has some crime, some meth, some alcoholism, drugs, different stuff going on, some little bit of rowdiness in some of the bars, and excuse me. But yeah, so I got a couple, mostly at like book clubs. I got some people that commented on that and wondered why I portrayed those places like that. And I just kind of said, I'm writing crime. I'm writing crime fiction. I'm gonna, even if I write about Big Mountain, there's going to be something negative going on if I'm going to write a crime, because, if there's a crime that occurs up there or something like that, or, there's going to be negative things, because crime usually occurs into, the underbelly of society. And so that's what you're going to see. So I try and also show the beauty of our area as well. And so it's not like I'm writing all badly about it, but I have gotten some flack for it, but not over the top. And it hasn't, and I don't think I did for The Weight of Night or for the book that the most recent that came out, A Sharp Solitude. I don't think anybody has mentioned anything about those two books in terms of giving the valley a bad name or anything like that.
I just enjoy the fiction part of it. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that, people take some umbrage that the Blue Moon might not be 5-star service, but it's yeah, that's super fun. I think that's one of the really, for those of us as locals, right, that's one of the engaging parts of the book, is to be able to put yourself in place, right, that you can think about getting around the valley and what it might be like for Monty to be driving in his truck all by himself in the dark of night, because we've all done that, right? And you're tired and you're hungry and there's nowhere to get any food. So I think that's one of the things that I think is so authentic about your book, but then you match it with these really in-depth, complicated people. And I just think it's amazing. Anyway, there's more questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
Well, we are up to the question that Doug talked about at the beginning, or at the beginning of questions. So Carlin Candy asked, have you ever been approached to make a movie about any of your books? Would you consider it? And if you were in it, which character would you play, Christine?
Ooh.
Oh my gosh. I have been, okay, so the making a movie thing is a super complicated thing. So what happens first, just to give you an idea of the process, what happens first is that your agent maybe will talk to a film or TV series producer, some kind of production company who has taken an interest in your book. And what they will do is make an offer to option the idea of your book. And or not just the idea, but the book, like they literally buy the opportunity to go and talk about your work in Hollywood. So they give you a certain amount of money. It's called an option. And it has a contract with it and everything. And what it does is it stipulates like whether they have 12 months or 18 months or 3 years to go shop the idea around in Hollywood to see if they can get investors and, if anybody's interested in acting in it, and if they can get somebody to make a screenplay out of it. And it's just a super in-depth process that happens. And I can't say that a lot of books get optioned, because honestly, not that many books get options, which is because there's so many books out in the world, so many authors, just, as there's so many people that write books and get them published, whether it's through self-publishing or through traditional publishing. But we put a lot of books out onto the market. And so out of all those books, not that many books get optioned, but there are a lot of books still that do get optioned, because we have so many books, in the sea, so to speak. And so when the books get optioned, though, the ones that do, there's probably only 1% of them that get made into either a series on TV or, a Netflix show or a Amazon series or a movie, or, it's very like, so what I'm trying to say is that if somebody options your book, you can't get too excited. It's exciting that your book is optioned because that, like I said, not that many books get optioned, but you can't get that excited that your book has been optioned because the chances of it actually ever going anywhere and getting anywhere are pretty slim. I mean, there just really are. And I don't mean to be negative. It's just very difficult. So with that said, my books have had some interest, and I have my fingers crossed, but it's less than 1%. So I'm not getting too excited, but I have had some production companies that are interested in my series, which is super gratifying, super flattering, and super exciting. Just the thought of it alone, even if it never happens, it's very exciting for me. And I can tell you that they would never pick me to play a character. But if they did, because I do want to answer your question fully. Who would I play? Yeah, maybe Tara, maybe some side character like that. So that my role wouldn't be too big.
I like it. Well, congratulations. And we'll all keep our fingers crossed as well, because wouldn't that be something if made it to the big screen? So
it would be something.
Yeah. So who do people think? So let's think about this collectively, and feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But so let's talk about Gretchen and Monty, right? Kind of the two major characters here. So who's Monty? Who's Gretchen? Don't be shy. Gina Bridgman, I know you have the answer to this.
Well, I like Andrew Garfield for Monty.
Oh, he's great.
I think he's probably about the right age, and he can do anything. I mean, he's just
super talented,
really
super
good.
talented.
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't know
would
about
love
Gretchen. I
that.
could think about that one. Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. He would be fabulous in that role.
So who's the strong one, but somewhat tortured person who would play Gretchen?
Lisa has an idea in the chat. She says Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, Reese Witherspoon.
Pretty
that
good.
Would be interesting. That would be interesting. There is a little bit of the Norwegian piece to that kind of leans you towards some of those big time actresses. But it feels to me like this should be kind of like an ensemble cast, kind of those. I don't think this is a Brad Pitt, Matt Damon thing. I think this ought to be real authentic actors for sure.
Yeah, I think Reese Witherspoon would be awesome. Hey, isn't she responsible for getting that book where the Crawdads sing into a movie?
Plus she's got a book club. So hey,
She's got a book club.
Who doesn't like somebody who has a book club?
Reese.
Yeah, she has a book club, and anything that she touches pretty much goes big. Anything that she picks as a book for her book club, it's kind of like she's like the way Oprah was years ago in the 90s and the early 2000s, with just anything Oprah put on her book club, had millions of readers instantly. And that's kind of where Reese is now. And plus it doesn't hurt to have her put her finger on the her production company behind a book either. So yeah, she'd be great. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I picture characters maybe that are just a little less known than the big ones like that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because like Doug said, it's an authenticity thing, like when you have a huge actor or actress like that, people, all they can see is that actress or that actor, that Brad Pitt or Reese Witherspoon, that sometimes it's hard to see the character that they're playing because all you see is them, Tom Cruise, so I don't know, but I mean, obviously she's fantastic and she's great at whatever she does. So.
And maybe we could get, since they spend time in the Flathead anyway, maybe we could get either J.K. Simmons or Billy Bob Thornton to play Mr. Combs.
that would be awesome.
I think Billy Bob would be perfect.
Yeah. And you don't get me wrong, when I talk about Reese, I'd be over the moon if Reese Witherspoon ever wanted to play one of my characters. So I don't mean to sound like a selfish brat about it. I can't imagine that she would, because that would be so amazing that it's hard to imagine, I guess.
But it kind of feels a little too like a Scarlett Johansson role, right? I mean, it's just, that would be kind of that feels like that would be okay. And you want Jeff Bridges to be in anything Western, but he's not the right age group for Monty. We got to get somebody a little bit, maybe a Ben Affleck or something like that. I don't know. I know that Stacey Dubuque's answer to this would be Keanu Reeves. So, we can always repurpose Keanu for any of them.
Yeah, that would be awesome too. He'd be great.
I think Andrew also has an idea about Gretchen. Andrew, you want to share, or I can read it?
Yeah, I just thought Frances McDormand had the toughness and sort of seems like she could be someone from the Valley. She maybe doesn't have the glamour factor of Reese, but I think she's very can play a hard-nosed character well.
She really can. Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah. What was the movie she was in that was the one of the billboards one?
Yeah, 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri or something like that.
Yeah, so good. Yeah. She did a great job in that.
Yeah, no, well, that's fun. If you keep thinking and putting those in the chat, we can come back to this. This is one of those that
I love it. That's
pop up.
It's so fun. It's so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to think about that. And how terrific would it be to be able to see this on the big screen? I think that'd be amazing. So I want to kind of suss out a little bit. When I read a book, I read every page. I feel like the authors and publishers have put in a lot of work. And I was kind of stopped short right at the beginning of your book, because you have a really thoughtful quotation that begins your book. And I wanted to kind of get some context from you about it. I'm going to read it. I know you're not supposed to read quotations, but I'm going to do it anyway. Where guilt is, rage and courage doth abound. I think that's Ben Jonson, I think that's a really thought-provoking kind of, where did that come from? How did that instruct your writing as kind of a foundation of this piece?
Well, so when Ben Jonson, probably second at the time behind Shakespeare in terms of dramatizations and, the writing back then. And when I thought about that, when I think about that quote, which is a quote, I don't know when I came across that quote, years ago, probably in graduate school or something. And when I thought about that quote, I would think about Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, and how she was she did this crime, they killed Duncan, and then she ended up not being able to sleep. And she started to sleepwalk herself and enact out, if you remember the play at all, she begins to sleepwalk and enact out the play. So when I had this character that had this sleep disorder, I kind of thought about her, but Gretchen is in some ways the opposite, because Gretchen isn't responsible really for what she did, whereas Lady Macbeth is, she and Macbeth were responsible for plotting out the murder and doing it. And so Gretchen really wasn't yet. And so in the end, it drives Lady Macbeth, pretty crazy. Yet for Gretchen, I felt like there was a courage, there was a different kind of thing that occurred for her. And there was this courage that abounded where she, I feel like guilt can make a person drown in it, like really bad guilt can really make a person just drown and just not be able to really function very well as a human being. And if it's really severe. And I think for Gretchen, it borders on that. Yet at the same time, she gets this courage that comes from, and this purpose that comes out of it, out of the guilt. And so I just think the quote really kind of brought up stuff for me about like what she is, what she's about, how by the end of the story, she really finds some kind of redemption really from her guilt by not necessarily being a hero. She doesn't see herself as a hero, but she kind of is a hero by the end of the story, saving this boy and making things, and doing it in a way that confronts her own demons and her own nightmares. And so I felt like she finds her courage in that a little bit. And in that she finds some redemption, not the kind of redemption that's going to allow her to ever forget about what she's done or ever have visions about. I mean, I think I handled that with a lot of, another editor probably would have told me to cut those pages back by 10%, the pages at the end of the book where she really goes into like how she feels at the end and how she feels that she has, that, she's not going to forget what she's done. She's still going to have all these visions of what she's done to her brother, and she'll never be normal. And she's still going to have the sleep disorder and she's still going to have to deal with it every day of her life. But at the same time, she feels a little bit lighter, like a little happier, like she's found some redemption. And so I thought the quote just kind of fit that.
So I'm gonna make a statement and you can tell me whether it's fair or not. I think the same, but to a lesser degree, might apply to Monty about guilt and courage and bravery, about not what he did to his brother, but what happened to his brother. Is that fair?
I think that's fair too. Yeah. Yep. I do. I think there's definitely redemption for Monty and trying to cope with what happened to Nathan Faraway. Because I think he felt responsible for that in a lot of ways, going out into the woods and being set up like that for that prank and going out there and having things turn out the way they turned out. So, yeah. And I apologize if not everybody's read Mortal Fall and it isn't tracking with what I'm saying. So
well, if you haven't, it's available right now at glacier.org. That's right, glacier.org, or at any of the stores in the park. By the way, Logan Pass opened, the Going Sun Road opened today. One of the inside tips I can give you, because I learned from one of our board members, those people who've been trying to get those 24-hour tickets have had some difficulty. The park, because the road is now open, has provided a lot more 24-hour tickets than they provided yesterday. I had a board member who wanted to go today, so he got online and he got himself a ticket.
Okay.
Which would not have happened yesterday. That's recreation.gov, as you know. So again, we're with Christine Carbo. It's such a treat to be with you, and we still got about 15 or so minutes together. I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about what I find extraordinary about the books is that in each of them, there are a lot of complicated relationships, both with siblings and in this book with children, with kids. How does your experience as a parent play into that? Because again, as a parent, the things that I read really resonate with me about experiences that I've had. Julie and I have had raising two boys, and the challenges that are there, and challenges of their friend group and things like that. So talk to us a little about how, as a parent, how being a parent, and part of that time as a single parent, how does that educate your writing and you know, in a way, or does it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it informs my writing. I think that, you know, quite a few of my characters have kids, not all of them, or at least some of the side characters do. And, you know, it's when you write a crime fiction book, you have to be careful about who your detectives or your sleuths or whoever you're writing about, who they have to take care of, because, you know, sometimes you give them a pet and it's like they're off trying to solve the crime, and the reader, all the reader can think about is, well, what's going on with the pet? Like, who's feeding the pet? Who's like taking the pet for a walk? And so that can happen too with children. And so you have to be careful about that choice to give your main characters children. But undeniably, children make a character much richer. Just, you know, not all of them. I mean, I think you can really have some interesting dynamics with characters that don't have children as well. And sometimes you can have characters like I did in Mortal Fall, a wife who wants a child and one who's afraid to have a child and says, no, this is not a good idea. And just the concept of having children can be an interesting dynamic, and you can explore that. But I feel like being a parent and having gone down that road and that pathway really helps me write about all things children, whether it's not having them, whether it's having them, whether it's a child getting abducted and how terrifying that would be, or whether it's in my next book, A Sharp Solitude, I have a mother who has a little girl, and that little girl, she has that with not an ex-husband, but an ex-boyfriend, and they never got married, but that boyfriend is a main suspect in a crime, and she's terrified that daughter is going to be saddled with this father who may end up in jail or something. And so she sticks her nose in where it doesn't belong to try and figure out like what is going on, why, you know, with this guy being the main suspect here, and really terrified that her little girl is going to end up with a father that might be convicted of something. And so it just something like that, just to know, like, as a mom, like what that fear could be like, or all those kinds of issues really fascinate me, and I love to explore them in my writing. Yeah.
Well, and that fascination comes through for me as a reader, that it's not just passed off as here's a mom and here's a kid and they're going to do normal stuff, that it's more complex. Is that I think about my characters, right? It's Kyle and Wendy, right? In this.
Right. Thank you for bringing it back. Yeah. Thanks for bringing it back to The Weight of Night. I was going to do the same, that, you know, I mean, just trying to understand like what Gretchen's mom and dad would have gone through back in Norway. And just what Wendy would be feeling, especially by the end of the book, with knowing what she knows about her father, and then dealing with a troubled teen, and like how difficult that is. And yeah. And then being somebody like Gretchen, who would like never even dream of having a child, given her condition, like what she might do to a child. So, yeah, that's a great question, Doug. I've never been asked that question before. All these years, I've done a lot of book clubs. I've been to a lot of places and done a lot of talking about my books, and I've never had that question. So good question.
Wow. Yeah, I've been known to be strange before. So, so I'm going to hand it off to Amy here for another, at least a couple of questions and some comments. But before I do, I would like to congratulate, so we're giving away 2 copies of the next book, the 4th book in the Glacier series, which is again another terrific one. It should come with a warning label because, as Lisa and I were discussing in a private chat, sleep deprivation does come with these books because you will not want to put them down. But they're great, great reads anytime. So Lori and Krista, congratulations, you are our winners tonight. So you will get a copy of the book. We will send it out to you. Yay. I will do my best to not embarrass myself in the next 12 minutes, and we'll ask Christine to come back again with us to talk about that book as well. We've got, because I said, about 10 or so minutes. We want to get to what's next for Christine, but Amy, I know that we've got at least another question and some comments.
Yeah, I think it was super interesting, Christine, what you said about just you have to be careful about what you sort of saddle characters with, because then as a reader, we sort of focus on that. I can totally recall times of like, yeah, what's happening with the kids, or where are the pets, or something like that that's been left out. So that is super, super interesting. All the sort of detail that goes into writing, even if you're not writing about that particular thing, you have to be careful. So Doug had mentioned Lisa's comment. She just wrote that this is my favorite so far. I had a hard time putting it down. And she finished very quickly and lost a whole lot of sleep. So that's a
Thank you.
Kudos to you. And Lisa left another comment when you were talking about Gretchen. She just said that you left Gretchen with new hope, and she thought that was really wonderful. So maybe there is hope for Gretchen out there. Kathy W. Said sorry that she had to leave early, but she really enjoyed the book and wanted to thank you for the book and for being on tonight. And then Tanya and Eric, kind of early on when Doug talked about the authenticity of your books, especially for those of us who are locals or who have obviously visited, they just said that they totally agree with Doug's comments, and that living in Cincinnati, far from Glacier, reading about your books takes them back to a place that they deeply love. And they wanted to thank you for sharing that with them.
So I promised a speed round, and have we done a speed round with you before, Christine?
I think so.
Okay, so I've got I have 5 questions. You have
Maybe
very
not.
short period of time to answer them, and you can pass on 1. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
Ceres Bakery or Fleur Bakery?
Ooh. Is there a time restraint on how long I have?
Today.
Okay, that's a hard one, but I live up this way, so I'm going to say Fleur.
Okay, it's Fleur Bakery. So these are 2 bakeries in town. Tupelo Grill or Abruzzo, 2 great whitefish restaurants.
Probably Tupelo.
Okay. East side of the park or west side of the park?
Oh, I love them both so much. I like to write about the east side because it's so desolate and haunting to me.
Can I say spiritual?
And spiritual, everything, all of the above. East side, I'll say east side.
Okay, east side, west side, you're gonna go. All right, that's very viable. Downhill or cross country?
Well, the knees are starting to hurt a lot with the downhill. So
We're learning a lot about Christine Carbo here, ladies and gentlemen.
Cross country is a little kinder and so peaceful, but I do love to downhill ski. Okay, so if my knees were perfect, I would say downhill. Okay,
so, and last but not least, for those of us who are Big Fork centric, this is a raging breakfast debate in Big Fork. Pocket Stone or Echo Lake Cafe?
Oh, that's really hard. That's a really hard choice.
I mean, you could lose fans here. Remember, you get 1 pass.
I'll pass. I'll pass.
We're gonna pass. The correct answer, by the way, is Pocket Stone, even though I live 1 mile from Echo Lake. Okay, so thanks. That's always fun. So,
Well, can
yeah, go.
I just want to circle back to some of the question or the comments that Amy read out loud to all of us. I just am so thankful to everyone. And those kind of comments just really make my heart sing. And I'm so thrilled that most of you enjoyed the book, if not all of you, or some of you, thank you very much for those kind comments.
Well, and I hope that you would be open to signing some book plates for folks again tonight. And if that's great, folks can email grace@glacier.org, grace@glacier.org, and she'll make sure that happens and work with Christine to do that. You could also pop something in the chat, but the most reliable way is grace@glacier.org. Christine, I want to talk about what's next. And Susan King had a question that might lead us to that, which is, have you ever considered pursuing Jeremy as a main character?
Ooh, I have not, but that's a great suggestion. Very good suggestion.
That her thought was that he might be interesting to explore as he grows up and into adulthood.
Yeah, thank you very much for that suggestion. I think it's a really great idea, actually. And I had not thought of that. I had not thought of that at all. But you know what? He does have he's going to have that rich history when he becomes an adult that I so love to write about, to delve into, that kind of childhood thing that informs so many, like in real life, our childhood traumas inform who we become, who we are. I mean, not that it's an excuse to not be a good person or anything, but I just really feel like so many of us are very much affected by the kinds of things that happen to us when we're young. And so I just find that rich material to write about when I think back about what a character might have experienced when they're younger. So Jeremy would be great. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I think all of us will want to read whatever you write. And it's hard to break away from a path, right? And this is obviously a very successful path and genre, but it also pigeonholes writing is a creative art, right? And to pigeonhole that creative art. So I imagine that I know you're writing now, but maybe you've been exploring some other avenues that might excite us as much or more. And we don't want to hear any trade secrets, but what are you thinking about? What might be next?
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, Doug, because I have been trying some different things, and which is why I've had this huge feeling of guilt when you were asking about Monty and Gretchen, because I've been exploring some other things. And I actually wrote a book over this. Most of the books have taken me about a year to write, but I wrote a book that took a long time for me to write over COVID, more than 2 years. I took a break after my fourth book, A Sharp Solitude, for a while, health stuff, different things going on in my life that I had to deal with. And so I took some time. And then when I came back to it, I wrote a book that was still set up in this area, but a little different in tone. And it took a long time for me to write. And it was one of those books, I just couldn't get it to be where I wanted it to be. And I decided that maybe it shouldn't see the world. And it was a very difficult decision for me, because I just was on that path where I felt like everything I wrote needed to go out onto the bookshelf. And it dawned on me at some point with this book that, wow, I mean, this might be one, I might have just spent a couple of years of my life writing something that is not going to be something I'm going to feel comfortable putting out there into the world. So I'm still kind of figuring that one out. But in the meantime, I just decided I would start something new and fresh, because I really was having a hard time deciding whether I should do that with that book or not, whether I should put it out there. I actually gave it to my agent, and she felt a little unsure herself. And that kind of was a red flag to me as well. So I don't know, we'll see, but it may also just be taking some time away from it and going back to it and doing some revisions. It might be that type of situation, But in the meantime, I've started something new, and it's also set up in this area, but it is very different than my Glacier kind of universe of books so far. It's a little more thriller-ish. And it's also been a challenge for me because I'm a pretty introspective thinker and writer, and thrillers tend to skid a little quicker across the page. And I think you can do both. I think you can be introspective and have a thriller, but I think you also, there are some adjustments that need to be made in your writing. And so I'm kind of trying to work all of that out right now.
Well, I think, well, a couple of kind of examples, is the manuscript you currently have. I mean, I think immediately of, Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee, right? That she likewise kind of had this, breakout hit, and you have a breakout series, and to think about something that's different, not terribly different in that case, but it's hard to kind of give oxygen to something you're not sure about, for sure. And then, but then there are, I think there are a lot of writers in your genre who very successfully go from, one series to another series, or don't ever have series combined. So I don't know. I think I speak for a whole bunch of people on this Zoom that no matter what you write, we want to read it.
Yay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That helps actually a lot, because I do sometimes feel like I might let fans down or readers down if I try and do something different, because people really love the Glacier thing and they want that to happen. I love it too. It's just that I don't know that I'm going to do it every single time. So yeah. So that helps, Doug. Thank you. Yeah. And thank all of you for bearing with me for this kind of Q&A loosey-goosey thing, because I know a lot of people give presentations or, have a slideshow or do something. And we've just kind of been winging it here. And it's been really lovely to answer your questions and have you engaged with me in doing that. But I hope that it wasn't too frustrating for anybody.
No, I think I thank you for giving so much of yourself, right? This format lets us get to know you as a human being, as a person. And that's really what the best books clubs do, right? They are about the book, but they're about the community, right? I see my dear friends Bing and Mary, and it almost brings tears to my eyes to see them. I have a book I got from them today. Thank you very much, from Amazon. This community for me over the last 2 years has been really important. Christine Carbo, you have been really important to me and to this community. And I think that's what our work at the Glacier Conservancy is all about, is about being in community with each other, sharing some special times with each other. And so we can't thank you enough. I will say, if you have not read Sharp Solitude, you should get it. You should read it. It's in every library in the Flathead, most libraries probably nationwide. And again, if I haven't mentioned it, it might be available at glacier.org. That's glacier.org. We just are so honored to have you as a friend of Glacier, as a person who cares so deeply about the park. And all of you, I just want to tell you, there you go. Well done there, Carl. I want to tell all of you what this time together means to me, to our team, and to the work we do at the Glacier Conservancy. It's such a treasure. We opened the bookstore today on Logan Pass, and because of the support of people who came there and bought books and a bear spray and a jacket because they forgot that they aren't in California anymore. We probably today made $15,000 net that we're going to be able to give the park, and that's the privilege of this work that wouldn't be possible without all of you. So thank you for being generous with your time again, Christine, and thank you to all the Glacier book clubbers, and thank you to my dear friends. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. We're going to go back to where it all started. My very first guest, John Fraley. I started with someone that I've known for a little while, because I will say I'm a little bit fanboyish when it comes to authors, and I have a little bit of fear of interaction. Christine knows this firsthand from many years ago. We're going to be back with John Fraley, Wild River Pioneers, an update to that fabulous book, and John's a character. So that'll be in 2 months, and then John McLean, Norman McLean's son, Home Waters, will be helping us close out the year. So again, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. And Christine Carbo, we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful
Good night,
evening.
everybody.